welcome to the Global Mobility Virtual Summit, where we're unpacking the employee experience from a variety of perspectives with a great lineup of experts and thought leaders. I'm Louise Wiles from Thriving Abroad, the host for these conversations, and I'm really pleased to welcome to this conversation Andy Piacentini. So in this conversation today, I'm going to be asking Andy to share his insights into the different aspects of the employee experience and asking in what ways the employee experience is a key ingredient in securing positive assignment outcomes. Before we get stuck into the conversation, let me tell you a little bit about Andy. Andy is Head of Rewards at Standard Life and founder of the Res Forum. Andy has 17 years of global experience in developing reward strategies and is widely published and regarded as a subject matter expert within the field of global mobility and international reward. So hi, Andy.
Hi there.
Great to have you joining us. I think you win in the background shot for everyone's interviews. I think so far we haven't had a city view as a backdrop, so I'm enjoying that picture. Where are you, Andy?
I'm actually, my kids are at a class and I'm actually outside a quiet spot, hopefully, outside their class. I tried to get, what kind of modern challenges, I tried to get a Wi-Fi signal within a quiet area inside and I couldn't get one, so here I am outside, and if I have to sort of stand on my head to get a signal, I'll do that.
Oh, brilliant. Well, thanks for fitting this into your busy schedule, and it's great to see that you're in short sleeves in Scotland. Fantastic. Hey?
Yes, it's not common.
Very uncommon, yeah. Okay, so let's get into the questions. So this summit is all about employee experience. What does that lead you to think about in terms of global mobility?
So I think for me, when we talk about employee experience, what we're actually saying is, businesses exist to make money, for sure. Business exists to be healthy organisations. But in order to achieve that, what you need is motivated and engaged employees, because actually what businesses and what organisation ask for employees might often fall into the category of the slightly unreasonable. We're asking people to go above and beyond to really win in the marketplace and to help the organisation win. So therefore, to flip it on its head, what organisations are realising is that positively engaging with employees in every aspect of work makes them win in the market. If they've got positively engaged employees, then employees will do more for the company, which means the company is successful. And in very simple terms, if you go into work and you feel flat, demotivated, don't like your manager, versus you feel motivated, you feel engaged, and you like your manager, in what scenario are you going to be most productive? It's a very easy question to answer. And if you use that as your starting point, then that's what employee experience is all about. It's about making those experiences great for employees so that they can feel more engaged and therefore more willing to deliver more for the organisation. Now, what I'll then talk about is how that ties into global mobility. And in fact, global mobility is inseparable from the employee experience, because it's not something that happens to employees, it's something that employees experience. And I think that's a really key point here, because in reality, historically, organisations have approached these kind of things about how they do to employees. So I've picked you to go on an assignment, and then I will look after you, and the mothership will steer you towards completion and success. But in fact, what we're realising nowadays is that some employees are self-initiating assignees. Some employees want an international experience to engage themselves. But equally, some employees want greater flexibility in order that they can feel happy in work, but then deliver better for organisational goals. So let me just bring to life an example of that. What we're seeing at the moment, for example, is the Brexit scenario playing out in the UK. And you've got some really difficult talent issues going on, whereby you've got the EU saying, hard Brexit, jobs will need to leave. You've got companies saying, we've not got the skills in Dublin, Frankfurt or Paris. So we want something flexible in order that we can get the right talent to achieve our objectives. And then you've got the individual who's saying, I don't want to leave the UK, but I understand there's a dynamic in play over which I cannot control. And so therefore, what you've got is a perfect storm of a requirement for employee flexibility, a regulatory requirement, but also organisations saying, yeah, what can we do? Because there's a scarcity of talent, and because this is all about talent, how can we enable that? How can we make it happen? So what I'm seeing, and what I would encourage organisations to do, is think about in that scenario how you can support flexible working, how you can make sure that a bit of support, and it doesn't need to be a bells and whistles expat assignment, but a bit of support to enable those kind of cross-border working arrangements to get your talent can actually be a win-win for both companies and individuals. And I know, for example, I've got a close friend who was approached about a job in Dublin, and they agreed with the company that they would commute to Dublin 3 days a week from the UK, from Edinburgh. Simple scenario, the job was based in Dublin, but the company gave a bit of flexibility around flexible working. They gave a bit of extra cash in the base salary, and they were sympathetic to some of the requirements about coming in and out of Ireland. A simple arrangement. The individual was there 3 days a week, sometimes 4, and it worked. So it worked from all parties. Mm-hmm. Flexibility for the company, flexibility for the individual, great result for the organisation, everyone wins. And that's how I want to flip the mobility discussion on its head, because I think for too long what we've seen is it being a kind of process-led or a policy-led decision, e.g. You don't fit into the categorisation that we define, therefore computer says no, versus having the employee requirements as a core part of the decision-making process. I'm not saying it has to be the fundamental number one driver, but it needs to be elevated in a discussion for sure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you're looking sort of personalisation in a way, so that you're fitting to the individual perhaps and circumstances. And I guess a way that this fits into other challenges that are associated with more traditional assignments, the dual career couple, for example, where that's becoming more and more challenging for companies to find people who have professional partners who are prepared to give up their careers and relocate. So there's a need to look for more flexible options, and perhaps one of those is this kind of mix of working in 2 locations and being flexible in your approach that way. Yeah,
that could help. I mean, I think the challenge with that scenario is a few things, because conceptually it's perfect. In reality, governments and regulations aren't keeping up with this, and this is going to be one of the challenges with modern working. For example, we talk about gig economy, we talk about the future of work, people freelancing and doing jobs. Great, but it's just one dimension. You've got workplace regulation, you've got companies doing 0-hour type contracts, which doesn't really help with discussion. They'll argue it supports flexible working. How it plays out is in fact kind of race to the bottom. Salaries. And you've also got the scenario I described, some cross-border tax issues, all on the individual. So that individual, because it's an Ireland-based role, pays their income tax themselves, but then gets caught out with UK and Ireland income tax. And so suddenly, something that's conceptually modern and progressive gets held back by the slowness and the lack of agility within the regulatory framework. And that's one of the challenges. Now, I was speaking to my boss yesterday, my other job, Standard Life, and he's relocating to Canada, and in fact he's a great guy, but he's got a same-sex partner, husband, and in fact what he said was the same-sex partner in Canada has got the most, out of the two of them, has got the most flexible working visa. Right. So the individual from the UK that's going to Canada has got a visa which says you have to work for company X and you're there for 5 years, and if you leave company X you have to leave Canada. But the trailing partner has got a fully flexible visa. They can work for any company in any industry in the sector, and well done Canada for doing that, albeit it's contingent on the partner still having full employment, the lead partner. Mm-hmm. But, that's probably as good as it gets in terms of a partner arrangement. And it meets everyone's requirements, because you're bringing in, just from a purely talent point of view, you've got these talented individuals that are trailing partners that can't work, that are sitting. It's like wasted inventory. It's talent that's sitting there that can't be utilised. Mm-hmm. So if governments and regulations can keep up with this dynamic work environment, then we could see another nice evolution of this concept, and I think it could actually accelerate both dual career and agile working and flexible working.
Yeah. And do you see governments moving in that direction? And we've had the Permix Foundation working for many years on behalf of companies who are wanting to push the rights of the partners in terms of international relocation. And they've made some progress. But do you see governments, responding to requests for flexibility?
No, I don't actually. I mean, I think if you think about some of the horrific stuff that's coming to light and the kind of this is a personal opinion, the populist movements you have in the UK at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, immigration for people that are currently extra communitarians, but then equally, as we know, post-Brexit, there'll probably be a tighter work requirement for ex-EU members, EU members that are no longer part of the EU. I think the risk here is that governments have got to juggle a populist agenda versus a talent agenda, and I don't think at this moment in time it's playing out the way it should be. The two don't seem to be lining up, and in my mind they should. But it's a complex scenario. There's political dynamics in the mix, and there's populist dynamics in the mix, which mean that actually losers here are probably companies, because companies need talent, and if it's going to get harder to get that talent, well, the government will say grow your own, but it's not always that straightforward.
Yeah. Okay, but let's sort of accept that perhaps it's not so easy, to have the flexibility at the moment. So if companies are having to grow their own, what are you seeing in terms of organisations at the moment and their connection of global mobility to talent development programmes? I know that a lot of reports have suggested that hasn't been happening particularly well in the majority of organisations.
Yeah. So look, I think it comes down to the organisation and its actual footprint and what it values in terms of the assignment experience. So I think most PLC companies will value the concept of a secondment as a stretching assignment, and take international off the table for a minute. Just the concept of putting people in a dynamic environment, changing their experience perspective. Most organisations in the FTSE 100, for example, or even 250 will recognise that. They'll have a dedicated talent team. The challenge becomes, do they see the international aspect as being a key educational experience to achieve better leadership and develop leaders? And I would say some organisations, yes, see that. They will have, like, for example, board appointments which are contingent on international postings. And they'll also value, if you bring it back to root cause, they'll value that international perspective shift that you get from just being a different scenario. Other organisations don't have the footprint. So if I think about Standard Life where I am just now, whilst we do value an international experience, we're so domestically focused that it's something that you do in one or two international locations to maybe plug a gap. And it might well, as long as it's a well-managed conversation, it might well help you achieve broader career goals, and it might broaden leadership opportunity, but it might not. It's not seen as the definitive experience. And so that's okay, because that reflects Standard Life's footprint. I think though, to this idea that international experience and international assignments are the defining talent experience, I think still needs to be proven. I think it does have value, but I think it's all relevant to the organisation. But for example, if I think about myself, I do have international experience. I've worked abroad. I've been on assignment a few times. I've worked in previous roles where they really were truly international, and I've developed skills to navigate that situation. But I've not found any of those skills particularly useful in Standard Life, I'm being honest. Perspective shifting, sort of the requirement to compromise, and sort of what I've always argued is how I've been successful is I might not know the answer to your location challenge, but I'm willing to listen. And but if you're in one geographical location where we've all got the same cultural perspective and we've all got the same situational perspective, therefore arguments like that don't really wash. So that long-winded answer to say, I think the argument's been won in terms of assignments and experiences outside of your core experiences stretching you. But for me, it's too simplistic to say you can extend that to an international assignment and think it delivers all the same organisational benefits.
Okay. And so I guess what came to mind as you were saying, talking about that, I guess it links to sort of the organisational's objectives, goals, and route for development. And if it's an international or expanding international organisation, then global mobility, talent development in terms of international development becomes part of that strategy. So do you see companies beginning to link global mobility better to their overall, strategic goals and objectives? Because I know that's one area where certainly your reports in the Res Forum have suggested companies are not making the connection.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, this is just my perception. The key lessons for global mobility are about looking at other areas of HR and seeing how they're aligning with business objectives, seeing how they're achieving business partnering, asking themselves what the demands are for those areas in order to be more business focused, and then translating those lessons to global mobility. Now, all very simple. For example, I was at a Res Forum meeting 2 weeks ago, and it was a heads of mobility conference that we pulled together. And one of the speakers talked about just simply realigning one of her team, one of her specialists, to have in her job title commercial mobility lead. So e.g. the area was commercial that she partnered with, and she put that in her title. So rather than being sort of functionally positioned, e.g. mobility lead, she defined herself as the commercial area mobility lead. Right. And the head of mobility said that one nuance managed to begin to open up doors, because what it told the business was, well, you're one of our team, but not just a functional area that's telling us what to do, but you're actually part of our team, hearing our challenges, and therefore using mobility to deliver our goals. Look, a very simple nuance, but you see parallels. So, for example, I'm head of reward for Standard Life, which is part of Standard Life Aberdeen. Now, Standard Life is a division. By having that alignment, then clearly I'm in two camps. I've got the reward function alignment, but I've also got the Standard Life division area alignment. And therefore, what I would say is, for mobility professionals, take those lessons that other parts of HR are doing about being as close as you can to the business, and actually begin to play with it and say, this is why we're here. We're here to support people bringing money in, and we're here to support the commercial areas. We're not here to deliver compliance. We're not here to deliver rule number section 2.2 of the mobility policy. We're here to solve business problems. Mm-hmm. And if you just do that shift in focus, it's a bit scary, and it means that you're led more by a business requirement rather than a kind of functional requirement. But it's exciting, and it actually brings you back to the core of why we're here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Fantastic. Actually, that neatly links into another interview with Chris Stebner, who was talking about exactly the same thing, making those connections, and that can make a big difference to the incorporation of different stakeholders in the whole conversation and process and perceptions within the organisation. Really, yeah, good. So in terms of supporting the employee experience, in terms of, let's talk assignment for the moment. From your work in the Res Forum, what are companies getting right in terms of supporting that process, that sort of relocation process and move abroad?
Yeah. So I think what I can first of all talk about is what doesn't seem to be working, okay, and what seems to have been causing discontent over many years. And I think the problem is, right, that mobility, in order to be successful, it's got to be valued by the organisation. Now, this becomes a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, because in order for it to be valued, it's got to have strategic impact on developing talent, and it's got to show that it's good value for money, the experience. But if you've got a chief financial officer and an accountant that can sort of screw it down to being a cost centre rather than a profit centre, which inevitably it is, but if it's a cost centre with limited value, then it's just a bit race to the bottom in terms of what mobility has to do. So some of the challenges we are seeing in our members is they're not winning the argument for a strategic mobility programme, and therefore they're being dissected, they're being broken down into its core constituent parts, and it's being seen as a sort of processing and compliance function, rather than a function that can value add and enable talent to be effective as quickly as it can in an overseas location. Now, the downside of that is that you'll always just get into a procurement discussion and a discussion around costs, and therefore any value add activities and any value add discussions you can add, they're never being heard because A, it's got a cost focus, but secondly, through having a cost focus, companies aren't hiring the right talent to manage it. They then can't make the case, and so the spiral continues. So what I'm hearing at our heads of meeting, and we had a few independent practitioners there as well, so not consultants, but people that have been heads of that would add value to that discussion. And what they were saying was, what they see companies asking them to do is to come in, set it up as a head of, but then in 9 months' time you'll move on and it'll just be managed by a middle manager. And as good as that is, it just becomes procedurally led and also compliance led, and not a value added conversation. And so the cycle continues. So this is a challenge mobility faces, because, as you know, the race to the bottom, managing costs, I mean, it just ends up in one place, which is it'll be wiped out by talent, by technology, or it'll be offshore to the lowest, cheapest location. And then employee experience is always at the end of the process. And then lo and behold, it's not a great experience for employees. You have a high failure rate during assignment, and you definitely, and this is never going away, the high failure rate of returning from assignment. So the whole thing feeds itself. But by that point, organisations are moved too quickly for people to even begin to really understand or track this stuff. And so it continues. So these are the problems that our sector faces. Notwithstanding that, where I've seen it work well and where I've seen it beginning to work better is where you have really good quality individuals at the table, and individuals that understand how mobility fits in with the overall HR model. And I think that's the key here, is about understanding what the business are demanding of HR and then translating that to mobility. So if the business are saying, we want business partnering, we want employee experience at the core, well, why would mobility be able to then say, but you're not following our policy or you're breaking compliance? That's not an employee-led response. And it's got a place and it's so important, but it shouldn't be your starting point. So to flip it on its head, if you can and if organisations are first and foremost approaching this from an employee experience point of view, are the ones that are winning, and the ones that are winning from making the case for mobility.
Right.
And so there are a few Raise Forum member organisations who talk to us openly about that perspective shift. And I can't share the names, but at the heads of meeting, there was at least 2 companies that I thought, well, that's interesting. They're beginning to see this in a different way. And for me, I made a bold statement a few years ago in the Raise Forum annual report, which was, evolve or die, and that still stands. Now, it may not have happened over a 2-year time frame, but I promise you by 5 years' time, the organisations that don't evolve, your mobility function will be like the travel and expenses department and no more, unless the shift in focus happens.
Yeah. Okay. So it's shifting focus, and it's a more strategic position in the organisation in terms of what position in HR and how does it link into talent development, because so often you hear about talent development as also being kind of another arm, I had a situation where I had an email from someone who worked in global mobility who was my connection there, and I suddenly got an email from him saying, moving on, not going to be part of global mobility anymore, moving on to talent development, so no longer needing to have the conversation with you. And I was like, I would imagine you needed to have the conversation with me more because you're talent development, and isn't that what's feeding into the global mobility policy? Yeah, it just seems, and that was a very big multinational. So,
So I'll tell you something interesting. I mean, at the Raise Forum, we were one of the first kind of companies, organisations to look at the diversity and inclusion through the mobility lens. That was only 2 years ago, but we were one of the first. Nobody was talking about it. And subsequently, there's been a lot of reports and a lot of people looking at it. So 2 years ago, we issued a report, and we got, at our data gathering, we got about 60 responses, which is quite good. I mean, it's not, that's a good baseline for doing some analysis. Last year, when we ran the same survey, initially, I mean, we drove up the numbers, but initially we were struggling for responses. And when we interrogated it, the answer was, actually, this area now diversity and inclusion has got a dedicated department within HR, and I don't deal with it, so I can't answer.
Okay.
You're thinking, what? I mean, and this is mobility's challenge. The practitioners see themselves as sitting within a very narrow area that's theirs, and they don't go beyond it, and they don't see themselves as part of a bigger discussion. And what actually happened between 2016 and 2017 was that companies did begin to recruit directors of diversity inclusion or diversity inclusion senior managers. So that mobility person's response was, oh, that's somebody else's area now. Shift, I can't do that. And you're thinking, you've missed the point. Diversity and inclusion isn't something that's done to you. It should be part of your organisational ethos. Everyone should be a champion of. But I think that's the challenge within global mobility, and it's a bit of a negative picture I'm painting here, but until we see ourselves as part of the overall HR problem and solution, we're always going to be this kind of isolated area that's just, oh, that's mobility stuff, I don't understand it, pass it over, versus part of an integrated solution. And that's, now, we talk about strategic mobility and mobility being part of a strategic organisation. That's not going to happen to you passively sitting back. Now, if you are in that position and you don't want to be in that position, you've got to begin to think about how you can add value strategically. And it starts off at a very small tactical level, the conversations you're having. You've got to show the value add in individual situations through leveraging your expertise, but also beginning to produce data and also beginning to advise business leaders to talk about, you're talking about moving somebody from A to B, and, you think it's a great talent move. Let me share some information with you. Let me guide you around some considerations. So those considerations might be a talent consideration. Have you thought about backfill? Have you thought about career development? Have you thought about how this fits in with the individual's development plan? Then it could be cost. Have you thought about the cost implications of this? They've got a trailing partner, they've got children. Do you understand what that means? Then it could be, I'm going to leverage my contacts in the organisation that deal with corporate tax because I understand this is an issue. Now, you don't have the answer, but you're beginning to show the value add to the HR business partner and the leader. And suddenly, you're able to pull together the full scenario and give them a view, which is, talent mobility is great and be an advocate of it, but equally, here's where I can add value and colour to the picture so you're making the right decision, so you're solving your problem the right way. And that way, you'll pull yourself in as the go-to. But if you just say, well, you can't do this because they won't come back to you, and you won't develop a good reputation in the organisation.
Yeah. So it's more of a consultancy-based sort of role within the organisation.
It's consultative. It's developing those great consultancy skills, diagnostic. What is the problem you're trying to solve? Listening, but then it's also not being functionally led or trying to dial that down. And then those two things combined show the value you can add, which means you'll be the kind of the go-to. You'll be involved in conversations.
Fantastic. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes. So just one more question, really. Actually, but the two are linked. So, what are you seeing in terms of the way in which companies are selecting people for relocation? Is there a defined process, or is it very much line manager driven and someone's just pulled out of a bag? And then how are you seeing that kind of selection linking into career development and then linking back into sort of when you come back to repatriation, the positions that people acquire as they come back, retention and all of those connections, those issues?
Yep. So, I mean, I can only talk at this moment in time about the last two companies I've worked for, and assignments tended to be business needs, critical business need requirement, and therefore it's very much you're picked, you're identified. It's part of a broader. You'll be on a talent radar, but you'll be identified as being somebody that we need to go out to location X because we've got a big business problem. Now, within that, informally, you might have expressed interest in travelling abroad, or you may have shown in the past that you've been mobile, which therefore feeds the informal view that's formed of you in terms of your overall talent profile. But what I'm not seeing is formalised assignments advertised to the general workforce. Now, granted, the last two organisations I've worked with haven't had huge expat programmes, so I'm talking about maybe 50 assignees at any time, and maybe 5, 6 6 moves a year. But I think about myself, not at Standard Life, but when I was before, I was approached about a permanent relocation to the States to do a head of rewards role. And I was part of the senior manager talent pool. My boss told me that the States had asked if I'd consider it. I did think about it for a while, and then I did a big formal reply to the overall head of HR in the States to say, look, given this consideration, it's not right for me at this moment in time. Now, that wasn't a formally advertised position, but it tied into a broader sort of talent conversation. And I don't have any issues with that. I don't see that as being a biased process. And I don't think it was, although it sort of lacked a formal structure, there was a formality underpinning it, which was the broader talent discussions that were happening in the organisation. I've also seen in situations where individuals have self-nominated, or they've approached the company and said, I understand we're growing in this area. I've got an interest in moving into this area. In Singapore, for example, would you support me? And again, an informal discussion, but somebody who was able to express their interest. They weren't passive in the process, but equally a company willing to explore. So I think sometimes we talk about formal processes as being a necessity, and I understand why you might say that, because it actually earns out kind of unconscious bias or biased processes. What I would say on the other hand is don't underestimate that there is some sort of informal process underpinning it, and it's not just jobs for the boys or coffee cooler machine conversations. It's part of overarching performance and talent assessments that happen over a period of time.
Okay, yeah, so it's a more informal process, but it's being taken seriously, I guess is what you're saying then. Yeah. And what about, so going to the other end then, in your work with the Res Forum, what are you seeing in terms of, repatriation? And I mean, there's quite a lot of talk about lack of retention once assignees return from their assignments, and their career development not being supported really in the way that perhaps they expected it would be when they first left on assignment. Are you seeing that in the Res Forum, in the research that you conduct?
Well, look, I mean, this is a recurring problem that has been there for many years. And I don't have the answer, because on the face of it, the answer is very simple. Deploy someone, make sure that they've got a career mentor, make sure that there's regular touch base back home so that the next step is lined up for the return. What I have seen is that where that's worked well, it's been based on individual senior career mentors mentoring the individual, seeing the individual as their talent and making sure that they're connected during the assignment and that there's something lined up afterwards. Now, we have also seen good talent recently come back and move into promoted positions. Individuals through restructurings have dropped off the radar. They've been talent, they've gone out, there's been a restructure, they've lost their sponsor. And both the individual and the talent management team have tried to help the individual re-establish networks to come back to. But I think the sad reality is that in order for this to work, there needs to be quite a lot of employee-driven aspects to it. And employees, I think the reality is we have to move away from this talent management is something that is individuals are passive in. I think the reality is that individuals have to be more active, both in developing their own networks and making sure that happens. And if they're sitting back waiting for stuff to happen, well, guess what? I mean, I would say in Standard Life the last 4 years that I've been there, there's been at least 4 restructures, significant ones, where if an individual left 4 years ago and the normal assignment cycle was to come back now, it's unrecognisable, There's no leave it. And so it's all very well talking about, you go out and then you plan the next 2 assignments. I think that's a complete fallacy. I don't think it's possible in the modern world to really go out and expect to come back. And I think you have to, if you recognise that as your starting point, then you have to develop strategies around how you will come back to a world that's going to be radically changed in 4 years. And then it goes full circle into, well, am I willing to take that risk?
Yeah.
And so the whole thing feeds itself, which is why international assignments, it requires individuals to be honest and recognise the risks attached to it. And if we're not willing to take the risks, then it goes full circle to, well, how our company's going to help individuals achieve that? Because the age-old problem is you throw money at it.
Yeah.
Or the individuals, well, you're building career capital. You've got to have confidence that if you don't have a job to come back to, you've had enough experiences that you'll get something great elsewhere, and that's a huge risk.
Yeah. But it's important that people understand that at the beginning, and I think whole partnerships of working in partnership with your business and recognizing that it's as much down to what you do as the organization, and positioning yourself and being aware of your own personal career development, developing your career capital, as everyone talks about, yourself, and recognizing your responsibility for that. I've seen so many times in living abroad, employees who have that expectation that the company is going to sort it for them, and the conversations about, well, where are you going next? Oh, the company hasn't said, and I don't know, and we're in limbo land, and it's awful. The company's a company. But, it's also down to the employee to look for those opportunities themselves as well. So it has to be a balance. I agree with that. Yeah. Great. Okay, well, we've come to the end of our half an hour. Would you like to just tell people a little bit about the Res Forum and how perhaps they can connect with you if they'd like to know more?
Yes, so the Res Forum, we're a exclusively in-house HR mobility networking group globally. We've got 16,000 members, and what we are all about is creating small communities to exchange information, benchmark information, but also leveraging our kind of global footprint. So if you want to join the Res Forum as a member, we'd be delighted to have you. You can get me on LinkedIn using my Sunday name, Andrea Piacentini. I'm actually going to be leading the Res Forum going forward from the next few months. I own it currently, but it's something I do in line with Standard Life. But I'm going to be leaving Standard Life and becoming the managing director of the Res Forum. And it's a very exciting chapter we're going into. So what I would say is, if you're interested in joining the forum and you're an in-house HR practitioner, please reach out. And also we have opportunities for select partners to work with us, and we are very keen on partnering with organisations.
Brilliant. Great. Okay, well, thank you very much, Andrea. I'll put links to the Res Forum and you underneath this video. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Andrea.
Yes.
So thanks very much, Andrea, for your insights and for your time today. I think from that there are some really important points around flexibility and how organisations are going to respond to the changing needs of international sort of roles in terms of location and how they handle those, and also in terms of more personalised benefits for different needs, different situations, and also the role of global mobility and how global mobility is valued in an organisation and how it is positioned in an organisation is crucial. So an important takeaway, I think, from today's conversation. Thank you all for watching. I will be back soon with the next interview in the Summit series. Bye-bye for now.